We covered the behavior between husband and wife, and the abiding principle is what? Who remembers the word? Chesed. Chesed, which means normally translates kindness, but it's really a special love, a love motivated by compassion and understanding. And chesed should be the abiding principle in everything. I find it very good morning. I find it very strange that when I do some marriage counseling, unfortunately I'm called upon to do it more often than I would like. We will say things to our spouses, to the people that we're intimate with in family, and we will behave with them in a way we wouldn't dare behave with any other kind of human being. Because we have an intimacy with them, we think we have a license sometimes to treat them in manners and say things that would be undignified, uncalled for. And we wouldn't certainly not use that kind of language if anybody else was around to hear us. What would they think of us, after all? So think about that when you're communicating with the words that you use and the way you use it. Would that be acceptable if you were talking to somebody else? Think about that. This is definitely a crisis of intimacy in this world today. Something I'd like to talk about in depth, but I don't know if I have time right now. We're an age of we live in an age of sexual freedom. I remember the excitement of the '60s growing up in New York. In the '60s I was already in college, and just to show how old I am. And the Flower Children. And I was at Woodstock because my parents. Not that I went to the concert at Woodstock. Concerts. My parents had a bungalow in a bungalow colony in White Lake, which is right down the road. And it was amazing when I walked to shul on Shabbos morning, which I did, which is a mile away in Kanyanga, around the lake. And see everybody hanging out and just doing their own thing, and it may have been raining or whatever. They didn't care. It was just high as a kite, and hardly anyone was wearing any clothes. And we live in that kind of age. This tremendous sexual freedom. The old story about a couple breaks up if they're going together for 6 months, a young couple. They don't think they're wasting their time. I think they've been practicing their intimacy skills. The fact of the matter is that sexual license is not intimacy. You can be sexually close with somebody, but not really be close. Intimacy is something that we all seek in life, to be close to another human being, to be close to that image of God in someone else, to find the other half of our soul, as the mystics would have it, that Adam and Eve were soulmates and they were split apart. That's why man and women constantly trying to find each other, to find their soulmate. I think the Hasidim have something here in their approach to it. I mean, it's a little too restrictive for me, but they see every encounter between a man and a woman as a possible sexual encounter. So you don't go into a room alone with another woman that's not your wife. You don't allow that to build into a certain situation where you may not be able to handle it. You avoid those kinds of situations. You can have friendships. Men and women can have friendships, but if there's not that kind of connection that you have with your wife, there has to be a certain distance. It's a source of offense to me sometimes when at a bat mitzvah or a bar mitzvah, You'll see in our synagogue we allow sometimes women to come up on the bima. You'll see a woman come up wearing a miniskirt, almost. I think it's offensive. It's just not appropriate. We live in an age where we try to turn each other on all the time. You can't sell anything without putting a naked woman in front of it, even if it's a truck. Doesn't really matter. Bar of soap, whatever. You turn the pages of magazines, and you're left with a feeling. I mean, nobody could look like that unless they starve themselves, And then you feel guilty. I mean, you can't make it. You can't be that way. You feel guilty. You're just not going to be that way. I'm not just talking about the women. I'm talking about the men as well. Because we've created a culture that creates a mindset within us that this is the ideal we should pursue for happiness and fulfillment. Well, this does not lead to the closeness, the intimacy, this connection that we really seek in life. It doesn't lead to it. And then we turn ourselves on all the time. I mean, I was watching cable the other night. I couldn't believe what I was seeing on television. Forget that. You can turn on, forget cable, regular stations, ABC, NBC, after 10 o'clock at night. It's unbelievable. I'm embarrassed to watch those shows with my kids. Just turn it off. We give a message, you sexually turned on, but wait. Back off. All this thing about sexual harassment in our society? Back off. Turn on, but back off. Well, that's not really natural. If you're going to be turned on, be turned on. If you're going to have to back off, well, don't be turned on to have to back off. Wherever we go, we're just filled with this sexual stimuli in society. It's just not appropriate. It's not appropriate. Because what happens, it leads to a lot of sexual dysfunction. And we have found in our society today an incredible amount of sexual dysfunction. I mean, you just turn on the talk shows. Any given day, you're going to find one talk show about women who can't achieve orgasm, or men who are impotent, and they're not functioning, or couples who come on. I mean, I can tell you how many couples that I know of who do counseling, and it's the men and the women both. It's usually very often one couple not interested in sex anymore. We've learned so well how to turn ourselves off to be guarded from the stimulus that we never get turned on. So this is the kind of society we live in. It's very difficult. It's very difficult. The Jewish way tries to project a more wholesome type of approach. Chesed in a relationship, kind of love that it comes from compassion, is what leads really to intimacy and to sexual fulfillment. And you've never really had a satisfying sexual relationship if you've never had sex with someone you loved deeply and you felt it was your soulmate. And once you've done that, you're not interested. You can get turned on. I mean, the stimuli is all around you, but it's not the same. It's just not the same. We spoke about a man is required to provide his wife 3 things: Shera Ksuta Volnata, clothing, shelter, and sexual rights. Sex is the obligation of the husband and the right, the privilege of the wife. What happens if he gets a job offer that would keep him away from home for extended periods of time? What does he have to do?
Ask his wife's permission.
He has to ask his wife's permission. Because maybe the wife prefers having her husband around and less money than having more money and not having her husband around. And although this is not true of certain Jewish princesses that I know of. we spoke about contraception. Is contraception permitted? Yes or no? Who remembers? Yes.
In certain situations.
In situations, okay. Such as?
Health. Health of the
Not if a wife is told by her doctor she cannot be pregnant because of her health, she can use contraception, but the law goes further than that. What does the law say? She must use contraception, because there are two principles in a relationship between a husband and wife. One is procreation, and the second one is pleasure. Now, the pleasure principle is very important. It's a mitzvah for husband and wife to bring each other pleasure, sexual pleasure. A mitzvah. What a way to look at it, in terms of many of the other religions of the world. It's a mitzvah to bring sexual pleasure to your spouse. As a matter of fact, the rabbis tell us on Friday night to have sexual relations with your spouse is a double mitzvah. One mitzvah you perform because you bring each other sexual pleasure. The second mitzvah is you're adding to the enjoyment of the Shabbos, of the Sabbath. Now, what about premarital sex? That's a topic I didn't discuss in depth, other than to say, according to the Torah, there's no strong penalty for it, as there is for other sexual kinds of misbehavior, incest or adultery, or homosexuality. They're punishable by death. But premarital sex is not even clearly defined in the Torah. However, rabbis really find reason, and good reason, to discourage it and not to permit it. Why is it that the rabbis decree that a woman who is not married should not go to the mikveh every month after her period to purify herself? Obviously, women were going. When in an Orthodox relationship, husband and wife won't touch each other when she's in nida, when she's menstruating before she goes to mikveh. So by extension, you shouldn't touch another woman who's in nida, especially when the temple was built, because then you become spiritually impure, and you couldn't go to the temple yourself if you touched her, another woman who was in nida, till you went to the mikveh. So apparently, the rabbis decreed women should go to the mikveh if they're not married, because apparently women were going to the mikveh. Why? They were coming out of the mikveh, and the boyfriends are waiting for them, probably. They discourage that kind of behavior, and they said it's really not permissible, and they give very good reasons why. Some of the things we talked about before, and some others. One of the disturbing things that comes to mind today, and something happened this past week in the Rabbinical Assembly of the Conservative Movement. They had their convention this week. I didn't see the article in the newspaper. I don't know how I missed it, but I'm sure I'm going to get plenty copies of it from the other Jewish publications that I get. Does anybody here has seen it in the paper? What did it say? Was it in yesterday's paper?
Yeah, it was in yesterday's, the place where they've got the comics and that section with the comics and everything else.
The comics.
In the religion page.
In the religion page of the Constitution. Yeah. Okay. So they decreed that what?
I think that they were talking. Did you read it, Derek?
Very quickly. I mean, it was conservative. There wasn't a single decree, of course. I can't call it to mind.
I think that they were saying that it. One was saying we don't want to make a ruling on this. Another rabbi said we'd like to, but this is life and we can't. What are we going to do? This is the way it is.
But they voted, didn't they vote? And it passed.
I'm trying to remember what they said.
I can't remember. They listed the main points.
Yeah, I don't remember.
I heard it on CNN.
Well, what did you
Must be.
Basically, they were saying, we don't recommend or encourage premarital sex, but if you're going to do that, then you should use these guidelines.
Yeah, they did have guidelines.
You shouldn't be promiscuous, and you should be honest and kind, and
One person, stick with one person.
I think it's I don't see a necessity for a rabbinic group to come out with a pronouncement like that. I really don't see it. Anyway, we spoke about what kinds of contraception is permitted. And generally, if contraception is permitted according to the chief rabbis of Israel, when you fulfill the commandment to be fruitful, multiply, which means when you've had 2 children, you replace yourself. Hillel says a boy and a girl. Shammai says 2 boys. But let's say you have 2 children and replace yourself. Then you can use the pill. This was the ruling of the chief rabbis of Israel. Clearly, contraception can also be used when you're planning a family. It just it's not worked out yet. But to use contraception to avoid have children altogether is not permitted. What kind of contraception is permitted? Contraception that won't interfere with the normal depositing of the seed into the woman. So condoms really are not allowed. However, in a case where other kinds of contraceptions are not viable, or where the pill is where a woman has a reaction to the pill, where she can't use a diaphragm for one reason or another, where spermicides are not as effective, or whatever. Just the other kinds of contraceptions are not allowed. She shouldn't get pregnant. So you should use a condom, and not only may you, but you should. And then I also pointed out that I'll tell my kids that they shouldn't have sex, but if they're going to have sex, they better use a condom. Because in this day and age, we have to. It's a matter of life and death. Could be. Now, I'd like to discuss with you a completely non-controversial topic: abortion. And then I'll try to give it a general overview of Jewish spiritual view towards women and the power of the feminine. I'd like to read you a quote from London Associated Press. It goes back a number of years. I loved it and I cut it out. And, it says the current issue of the Lancet, a British medical journal, includes this contribution from L.R.C. Agnew of the University of California School of Medicine at Los Angeles. One way of catching class attention is to ask what advice students would give when presented with their family history. Okay? So here's a family history. You tell me kind of what you would recommend. The father has syphilis. The mother, tuberculosis. They already have had 4 children. The first is blind. The second died. The third is deaf and dumb. And the fourth has tuberculosis. The mother is pregnant with her 5th child, and the parents are willing to have an abortion should you so recommend. Well, what do you say?
Without a doubt.
Without a doubt.
I've heard this before.
Yeah, okay. Anybody else? Let's take a vote. How many would recommend an abortion?
Blanket, but when you get into a little more detail.
How many would not? Well, those who would have recommended an abortion would have just murdered Beethoven.
Oh, dear. Still would have that.
Think about it.
But he came out okay.
It's very hard to say, When does a soul enter the body? Conception or birth? Birth. Anybody else? Birth. Conception.
Conception. Once you've started a fetus,
Well, I could see why you would say birth, because according to Jewish law, and this is a very important principle here that we're going to talk about, uh, a fetus is not considered a human being until it's born. It's considered a limb of the mother, like an arm or a leg. So if it's not considered a human being until it's born, from an abortion, it's not murder. So if it's not a human being until it's born, maybe the soul doesn't come into it until it's born. No, we believe the soul enters in at conception. That's why abortion is very difficult for Jews to think about. Nevertheless, there may be times where it's permitted. Let's talk about how and why. Okay. The Talmud in Chulin says, "Ubar yerech imo," that a fetus is a limb of the mother. Now, this had practical implications in the law. Let's say you buy a cow, and it's found out that the cow was pregnant when you bought it. Well, maybe since the cow conceived when she belonged to a previous owner, that maybe that embryo, that child, the calf that will come out, should belong to the first owner. We say no. The fetus is a limb of the mother, and therefore it belongs to the current owner. Let's talk about a convert who converts, who's pregnant. A woman converts to Judaism while she's pregnant. The baby was what?
Born of a Jewish mother. So the baby would be Jewish.
Baby would be Jewish because it's born of a Jewish mother. But if we say that it was already conceived before, it was already a human being before, then you would say that no, the child's not Jewish. So the important thing is that if it's a limb of the mother,
It can murder, she can murder.
right? It's her. It's part of her. It's not considered separate. However, I would tell you there is a dissenting opinion, a very strong dissenting opinion in this matter, who says that the Jewish court should know if when converting a woman whether the woman is pregnant or not pregnant, and the court should have an intention if the woman's pregnant to convert her and the child as well. Just for that other opinion who holds that even though it's a limb of the mother, but it was conceived before, there might be some doubt. So we try to. That's the reason why a woman should not get married for 90 days or so after the conversion, because you would know if she would start showing after 3 months she's pregnant, you would know whether she was conceived before or
What
not.
do they do with a bris?
What do you mean?
Is there a special prayer that's said or something to be sure that they consider the baby Jewish?
I don't follow you. If the woman was pregnant
No,
and she converted,
I'm just talking about afterwards. The baby's born, they're going to have a
He's
bris.
Jewish.
he's Jewish.
He's Jewish
He's born.
automatically?
Sure.
There are no prayers that are needed?
No separate prayer. Okay. Next principle. The fetus is not a bar kayama, is not considered a viable human being until it has proven it could live at least 30 days. Therefore, we don't even there's no real formal mourning period for an infant who dies under 30 days. You know, Shiva, Kaddish, etc. Tell a parent who loses a child, a newborn child, that they shouldn't mourn. Of course, they're mourning, they'll be mourning for a long time, for years. But there's no formal mourning because it's not considered a viable human being until it's proven it can live 30 days. There's different stages of this viability. One of them is 8 days. That's why we don't have the circumcision till the 8th day. Or
Maybe that's what I'm thinking.
but there's more to talk about on that. The question is feticide homicide? The Torah says, "Ma ke'ish," he who smites a man, he should be put to death. Does this include any man? Does it include, say, a day-old child? The Talmud says yes, citing another text, "Ki kach kol nefesh adam," if one smite any nefesh adam, literally any human person, or any human soul. Any understood to include the day-old child. But nefesh adam is taken to exclude the fetus of the womb, for the fetus of the womb is lab nefeshu, not a person until it is born. Torah says, if men strive and wound a pregnant woman, so that her fruit be expelled, but no harm befell her, then shall he be fined as her husband shall assess, in the matter placed before the judges. But if harm befell her, then thou shalt give life for life. In other words, the Torah says, if two men are fighting, and they bump into a pregnant woman, and she has an abortion because of it, she loses the child, then they have to pay a fine. If they hurt her or kill her, then in other words, it's not a fine. It's not considered a capital offense to kill a fetus. Not considered a capital offense. Serious, but not a capital offense. I don't want to go through all this. It's just very cumbersome. All right. So feticide is not homicide, but it's not permitted because, number one, it causes damage. Because you neglect the commandment, the mitzvah, be fruitful, multiply. And because, number three, a fetus is a potential life. Now, we know that Sabbath prohibitions are set aside when one's life is in danger. If someone gets very ill and you're not sure how sick they are, and they may be very, very sick, and you want to take a chance, you may violate the Shabbos to save them. Get in the car, drive them to the hospital, whatever you have to do. Someone's sick, very sick, and very cold, you feel they may get pneumonia, and you can even light a fire to warm them. You violate the Sabbath to save a life. What about the life of a fetus? You violate the Sabbath to save the life of a fetus. The answer would tell us something about the seriousness of taking such a life. How about the case where the mother dies in the middle of the birth process? Can you violate the Sabbath to save the fetus? So the Talmud specifies and says that surgical instruments can be brought on the Sabbath in violation of the Sabbath to save the fetus. What is news in this, not only it may be done, but it must be done. So you must violate the Sabbath to save the fetus. Show us how serious the rabbis took this.
Well, then the fetus is more than the arm of the mother. It's an individual.
It's the arm of the mother, but it's also a potential life. Right. The reason for this is the possible independent survival of the infant. Thus, we may be dealing already with an independent life. Is there a difference between the early stages of pregnancy and the later stages of pregnancy? If only the fetus is threatened, may the Sabbath be violated for its sake. May a healthy woman be fed on Yom Kippur, for example, for the sake of her fetus. She's not to fast.
doesn't that fall in the same category like at Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah when they make the announcement if someone is somewhat ill, they don't have to keep standing and sitting, they can sit.
Yeah, but standing and sitting in a prayer is a lot different level of seriousness between eating on Yom Kippur,
On
which
Yom
is what the
Kippur,
Torah
but-
tells you is very, very, very serious. There's a principle in the Talmud said, violate for him this Sabbath, in order to save a person if they're ill or whatever, so that he may remain alive to keep many other Sabbaths. In other words, future viability is important.
And that answers that.
Okay. There is a difference between the different trimesters of pregnancy. The first trimester, at the end of the 3 months of, during the first 3 months of pregnancy, and the end of those 3 months, the beginning of the second is where the pregnancy is noticeable, and we experience movements. Abortion was much looked upon much more leniently during the first trimester than the others, because it's the first trimester the fetus was considered maya bialma, just like water. It hadn't taken any real form yet. Talmud calls it a mere liquid. When the 40th day is when the embryo begins to form, according to the Talmud and other references. So, in terms of, they don't permit it during the first, summarily permit it, but they're more lenient in their rulings. The very important principle is the principle of the pursuer, the aggressor. In Hebrew, we call it the rodef, one who pursues someone. We have a law: if you see someone trying to kill someone else, you have an obligation to kill that person. Just sort of the opposite of the other law, which says that if someone says, "I'm going to kill you unless you kill them," you're not allowed to take their lives. But if you see someone taking someone else's life, pursuing them, trying to kill them, you have to stop them, and if it means killing them, you can do that. It's permissible. But what if the fetus is threatening the mother? What if the fetus is threatening the mother? And this is the most difficult a principle and to understand, because there are many different applications. If your leg becomes gangrene, what do? You take some sort of instrument and you cut it off to save your life. Well, if the fetus is considered a limb of the mother, if it's harming the mother's life, you take it out. Take it out. You try to save the life. That's there. That's a very basic principle. Now there are two approaches. When abortion is not a medical necessity, but it's not threatening physically the life of the mother. One builds down and the other one builds up. Chief Rabbi of Israel, one of the new modern state, the first chief rabbi, I think his name was Unterman, he sees abortion as being akin to homicide. And therefore it's permissible only in cases of corresponding gravity, such as saving the life of the mother. He cites an actual incident from the time of the German occupation of Poland and Lithuania during the First World War. A Jewish girl had become pregnant by a German officer and insisted that he assume responsibility for the child's upbringing. Interesting story. The officer sought out a Jewish doctor and ordered him at gunpoint to perform an abortion. This is almost like that case that I talked to you about. Kill him, and unless I'll kill you, you're not allowed to do this. But here it was an abortion, a fetus. So, Unterman says the doctor would not have been required to undergo martyrdom rather than a seed, according to his point of view. Because he has to save his own life. Why? Because it's not considered a human being yet. It's not murder. Nevertheless, potential life is involved in Judaism's reverence for that life bespeaks only the most serious warrant for abortion. Rabbi Unterman does include extreme mental anguish as well, though. If a woman has suicidal tendencies, and you might think that she'd go into a very deep depression, having this child, postpartum depression, whatever that maybe you could specify, and that it may lead to suicide on her part. And what do? You do an abortion. Try to save her life. Precedent for equating mental health and physical health comes from a late 17th century rabbi who asked whether non-kosher chicken soup could be given to a man who believed it to have therapeutic properties and was in danger of going out of his mind unless he had some. On the basis of Talmudic teaching, Rabbi Meir Mizrahi argued that the serious danger to mental health is tantamount to risk to one's physical well-being, and issued a permissive ruling. At least one responsive applied it specifically to the matter of abortion. So whether the danger to an existing child is also contemplated in the strict interpretation of abortion law was answered in the affirmative in a recent responsive. Asked whether a woman whose milk was affected by a pregnancy, she was nursing a child, she became pregnant, her milk was affected by a pregnancy, whose infant could not substitute formula feeding as attested to by physicians. So Rabbi Yitzchak Olbaum replied that an abortion would be justified to protect the health of the existing child. In one response, termination from pregnancy resulting from rape is dealt with, and at least post-coital contraception in such a case. The matter at hand was the permissibility of a moch, the auth, which is one form of contraception we talked about, similar to the diaphragm or some sort of sponge. The author of Rabbi Yehuda Perlman Abin cites the Talmudic case of a victim of rape, who, according to Rabbi Yossi, there need not wait the statutory period of 3 months before marriage, usually required for establishment of paternity if she was to conceive immediately, because she presumably used the moch. In other words, she had used the moch, and she was raped. Even if a woman were forbidden to destroy seed post-coitally, our author says this Talmudic presumption indicates that in the case of rape, she may certainly do so. In other words, we said that one of the principles was that in determining contraception was the structure of the seed, that we're not allowed to destroy the seed. So, certainly in the case of rape, you're allowed to destroy the seed. So what's this new pill that's coming on the market? This RU482. Maybe that, in the case of rape, that certainly would be permissible according to this. At least it would seem so. The reason she may is that while a woman is said to be a vehicle for reproduction, as a human being, she differs from Mother Earth in that she need not nurture seed implanted within her against her will. Indeed, she may uproot seed illegally sown. That's one approach. Second approach builds down for Chief Rabbi Ben Zayin Uziel, who was the Sephardic chief rabbi this year. The first was the Ashkenazi. He says abortion is not a homicide. It's just, it's different. In the case of a woman convicted of a capital crime, who goes forth to be executed, and who, after the verdict is returned, is found to be pregnant. Right? I mean, it's a hypothetical case because Jews never carried out capital punishment. The ruling is we do not wait for her to give birth. We execute her immediately. Tosfot in the Talmud explains that in keeping with the duty of the court to avoid unnecessary suffering for the convicted criminal, the execution must follow directly upon conviction. Just think about it, what we do today, trying to, our court system, someone's convicted and sentenced to death, we make them wait 10 years before they get here. If a pregnancy was known beforehand, the trial would, of course, be postponed. After the trial, a delay is inui, suffering. A further provision is recorded in the name of Rabbi Samuel in the Talmud. If she's going to be executed while pregnant, an abortion should be brought about beforehand so that the execution does not cause the fetus to come out and to the disgrace of the woman. To prevent this disgrace, this non-physical suffering or disgrace, then abortion is prescribed. They're very, it's not a very pretty case here, but it's very instructive. It's clear that abortion is not permitted without reason. But for a reason, even if it is a slim reason, such as to prevent the disgrace of the mother, then we have a precedent here. Right? What about a 14-year-old girl becomes pregnant? Right? Would that be a disgrace to her? You might make a strong case for that. The tradition personified by Rabbi Uziel, especially its emphasis on the avoidance of pain for the woman, is carried forward by others. As Rabbi Moshe Zweig of Antwerp does so, at least in principle. He introduces from left field, so to speak, a law of Maimonides code dealing with the husband's obligation for the support of his wife and the special circumstances of pregnancy cravings. Those who have had children will relate to this. A certain amount was set aside for her support, but she has a desire to eat more or to eat other foods because of the sickness that comes from her cravings. Sends you out in the middle of the night to get a pint of Haagen-Dazs and chocolate peanut butter or pickles or whatever. She may eat whatever she wants. Her husband may not.
A smart man made that ruling.
Her husband may not try to stop her, saying if she eats too much or eats wrong food, she might miscarry. For her physical pain, the pregnancy cravings are to be considered first.
But she stays home and you go out and get it.
Right, of course. My wife sent me out in such a snowstorm once.
For what?
For Haagen-Dazs. That's why I brought it up. Now she doesn't have, is not interested anymore. The principle that comes from a mother's pain first, however, is the most pervasive of all factors in the consideration of the abortion question. It probably produces the following fundamental generalization. If a possibility or probability exists that a child may be born defective, and the mother would seek an abortion on grounds of pity for the child whose life will be less than normal, the rabbi would decline permission. Since we don't know for sure that the child will be born defective, and since we don't know how bad that the defect will be, if you got a child's going to be born with half a leg or half an arm or that sort of thing, we have prosthetic devices. We have ways of making some sort of normalcy to a life. You shouldn't have an abortion just because you feel sorry for the child. And since no permission exists in Jewish law to kill born defective babies, permission on those grounds will be denied. If, however, an abortion for that same potentially deformed child was sought on the grounds that the possibility is causing severe anguish to the mother, permission would be granted. The fetus is unknown, future potential parts of a part of the secrets of God, but the mother is known, present, alive, and asking for compassion. So, in the case of a Tay-Sachs child, Tay-Sachs disease, I don't know if you know about that.
Yeah.
Genetic disease common to European Jews can only happen if both the mother and the father are carriers, and they have a 1 in 4 chance of having a Tay-Sachs child.
When a fetus is old enough, the X-ray, and you see it's minus one limb.
Yeah, So if you do it for the child's sake, you're not allowed to. If you do it for the mother's sake, you're allowed to, according to Rabbi Yotam.
In the sakes of the Tay-Sex, if you have an amniocentesis and you know that child,
So
yeah,
say so.
that's
So
good.
you could understand the kind of fear for the anguish of the mother, because I have been through this with a family that were both tested for Tay-Sex. Then before they had their first child, they were tested. They tested the child in an amniocentesis, and everything was fine. It was just negative, and the child was born fine. The next child, they did the same thing. They went to the hospital, had amniocentesis, and the hospital screwed up the test and said the child was fine. The child was born Tay-Sex. The agony this family went through for 3 or 4 years, unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And you can certainly make a very strong case for an abortion when you know that there's a Tay-Sex child. But with any genetic type, similar type of disease, is Tay-Sex not the only one? Rabbi Yotaman's response discussed here dealt specifically with the question of rubella. This is talking about German measles. He rules out an abortion, saying we have no law that permits us to deny one who was wounded. Rabbi Jacobovitz, who was the chief rabbi, I think was the chief rabbi of England, makes a similar point with regard to thalidomide babies, born with a little arm over here. Since physical or mental defects in no way compromise the claim to life or make a difference in the laws of murder, he writes, it follows that no such legal distinction may be made for feticide either. So you find out your child has Down syndrome. I can tell you personally, from working with families in this congregation as well as others, a Down syndrome child can bring a tremendous amount of joy and love to a family.
And Mel
Tremendous.
It's a very smart child too.
Yeah, and they can live for a long. I mean, it used to be they didn't live to 20. I mean, now.
Six eggs, and they're allowing them to go in and pick, well, we're going to destroy like 4 of them, we only want 2 of them. And there was this big outrage about whether or not that should be allowed for them to do that.
Mm-hmm. That's a difficult question. The Catholic Church would say you're not allowed to do in vitro fertilization because it's not natural. Judaism doesn't say that at all. Judaism says that this world was created imperfect. It's our task to perfect this world. So if a couple has trouble conceiving, you do what you can to perfect that situation and allow them to conceive. And if that has to be a test tube baby, it'll be a test tube baby. So be it. And it's not forbidden. And in fact, it's a great mitzvah to do it. The question now becomes, if you fertilize 6 eggs and you want to pick one. Or you want to have designer eggs, you're able to do all these tests on your eggs, and you get to see if you get 6 fertilized eggs, and you say, this one's going to have blonde hair, and this one's going to be 6 feet tall, and this one's going to be smarter than that one, and that one's going to be a boy, and that one's a girl. It becomes a moral issue. That becomes a moral issue, and I would think there would have to be some very stringent guidelines. Morally and ethically, certainly from a Jewish point of view, religiously, and how to deal with that. And I would agree that that's a very serious concern.
Part of the in vitro problem is that if you plant all six are not going to make it. Typically,
No, I'm just talking about.
That's
people
okay,
that
but
conceive
that's
that
God's
are-
problem. That's not your problem.
Right. It's when it's picking it versus can you you
Right.
take out 20 and you and over
Right.
the
They're
course of
just
time you
saying-
implant 10. What do you do with the last 10?
Right. Freeze it. I fear, however, that the continuation of pregnancy would have such debilitating effects, psychological and otherwise, and the mother would justify abortion. Rabbi Zweig's response, quoted frequently herein, also was addressed to the thalidomide question in the wake of the celebrated Liege trial in his country, in which a Belgian mother who killed her child born with deformities caused by that drug was acquitted. He turned to the question of an abortion in such a case. During the first 40 days of pregnancy, there does not seem to to be much standing in a way because it's considered more or less unformed, it's like water, and he's inclined to permit it. After that, an abortion is sanctioned only for the health of the mother. What do we have here? Just sum up. I went through really an hour and a half lecture in about less than about a half hour here. Abortion is not summarily prohibited. Would a Jew come down on the side of pro-lifers? Not really. I would say that we say that abortion is wrong, it shouldn't be done except in special circumstances. And some of the bills that are coming out in many states to prohibit abortion, except in cases of rape or threat to the health of the mother, might not be such a bad idea. One of the things that really irks me is an image that's maintained in my mind. I was, a rookie rabbi, so to speak, when the abortion ruling, I think it was from the Supreme Court, came out in the early 70s. And there were some Jewish doctors in my congregation, and a couple of them opened up an abortion clinic in southern New Jersey, near Atlantic City. It was before gambling. And you should see the lines form of Jewish women waiting their turn to sign up to have an abortion because they already had 2 kids and they liked their life that they had now and they didn't want to interrupt it. And they didn't want, maybe they wouldn't be able to drive as nice a car or have as nicer clothes, or maybe they would be 2 of their kids would have to sleep in the same room, God forbid. To me that was tremendously offensive. So I really have a distaste for the way abortion is being used as a contraception. And not only here, in Israel too, it's a tremendous problem in Israel. Having said that, I also have a problem allowing the legislature to legislate these kinds of things. Because Judaism does permit abortion in many cases, as we talked about. And the world in the United States before 1970, where a woman
still
could
have
not have an
abortion.
abortion unless you did it illegally, you couldn't have a therapeutic abortion in the United States in the 60s, I don't believe.
It was a DNC, but it was really an abortion. But they wrote it up as a DNC.
DNC?
It happens in Catholic hospitals all the time. It's just a DNC.
And what if it's beyond that stage?
That's another story.
Yeah, and it's a threat to the life of the mother or whatever. So I'm uncomfortable with allowing the power of the legislators to come up with that kind of decision. But I certainly would not come down on the side of pro-choice, and I don't come down on the side of pro-life either. I try to come down what I think is the reasonable side. Abortion should not be permitted except in special circumstances, where it's a threat to the life of the mother, physically, mentally, cases of rape, that sort of thing.
But is it appropriate for a Jewish mindset to be applied to people who are not of that mindset?
I think this is a moral issue that the Torah is talking about, and I think it applies to all humanity. I don't think it's just a Jewish type of thing. Yeah.
What's your feeling on sex education in high school?
My problem with sex education is being taught now to 5 and 6-year-olds. The kinds of things that are being taught or recommended to be taught, because such ages create such a scare in people that they want to teach sex education to 1st and 2nd graders. It's unbelievable. So as far as high school is concerned, I believe it's appropriate, especially in a lot of grades in high school, junior and senior years, for for kids to know about how the human body works, human anatomy, how it functions, and question is, do you preach sex? Do you preach abstinence? How could you avoid not doing it? Does teachers have certain biases? I think you're very careful how you write that kind of curriculum, but I do think it's appropriate to teach. After all, we live in a very frightening world. I don't think AIDS is a real threat among 6 to 7-year-olds or 10-year-olds. I really don't. At least not from sex. It may come from other means. I have other problems with teaching. I mean, last year, they came out with this whole series in the schools in New York City, teaching about gays and lesbians. You know, and Johnny has 2 daddies. You know, in teaching you how to book, we're teaching you how to read. You know, like I learned how to read. You know, look, Sally, see Spot run. That's how I learned to read. You know, look, Tommy, I have 2 daddies, and they're in bed together, and we live together. Isn't that wonderful? Well, I have a real problem with that. Okay, I want to get to begin another topic, another side of this. Anything else I wanted to do with this?
What did that Bobbitt's wife get when she was brought to trial?
She got off, did she?
She got off.
She had 30 days of cycling.
Psychological.
Right.
Treatment.
Because, he was arrested again with his new girlfriend.
That's right.
He was
Arrested for what?
For
Beating
beating
her
her
up.
Really?
Yeah. So if she did it to him, could happen again.
Uh-oh.
There was another case where, I'm not sure.
There was
who it
she was
where
deported, wasn't she?
It might be an epidemic going on.
No, I don't think so. I think
Shop.
occasional acts like that have been going on for years. Occasional ones, but it didn't get,
Out until this.
Yeah, and they would be reporting them if they were happening more and more. Believe me, they are looking for them.
News.
Oh yeah, right. Very newsworthy. You know what's interesting? We were
Itself.
watching ITN, International Television News or something, and they reported they reported the Bobbitt arrest in New Jersey or Las Vegas, and then the next day I saw it on CNN. So across the ocean in England, they were reporting it before we were reporting it. I thought,
That's cute.
I actually thought maybe our journalists had some, anyway, but they didn't.
Oh, come on.
Anyway, I had a lot to talk about as far as that's concerned. When I had organized a rally against Buchanan when he was running for president at Marietta, and we ended his political career, hopefully for good. Then, because his racism and anti-Semitism really came to the fore when we challenged him there. I did a lot of interviews with foreign press, and I could hardly get a word or two in to the local press, let alone the national press here. They weren't interested. It was very strange. They wanted a soundbite. They didn't want anything in depth. Anyway, I want to talk a little bit about feminism. I'm not going to finish it today, but I want to begin it because I think it's very important. Not feminism in the modern sense, but the feminine power that exists in this world. It's an extremely potent force. The problem today is we've been ignoring it. And from all the philosophers like Immanuel Kant, where we've come up with an understanding that the source of ethics in this world is man's reason, which tell us how we should behave. Kant, and you have Locke and Humes and all those modern I wouldn't call them modern philosophers, but recent philosophers. That has led to a disease, I would think, in the modern psyche in the world today called relative ethics. Because under relative ethics, you can make anything ethical. I mean, the Nazis thought they were making the extermination of the Jews an ethical force. Relative ethics. You know, when a kid goes out and commits a crime, kills somebody, not his fault. He grew up in a disadvantaged home. You know, his mother was a drug addict. His father beat him, drunk. Not his fault if he goes out and commits a crime and kills him. Yes, it is. That we have to have a certain standard of morals and ethics in this world, and that is not relative. Yeah, we should be compassionate and merciful, but we know that certain things are wrong because they're wrong. Killing is wrong. Stealing is wrong. And why is it wrong? Why is anything right or wrong in this world? The real reason why things are wrong, at least from the Jewish point of view, is because God said so. It's wrong. You can make all kinds of other cases, but that'll only lead to moral and ethical relativism. Things are morally. There has to be a higher standard above our own minds and above our own reasons about certain things. Humanism in this world has created the understanding that man is the source of values. The problem is that values change. And there must be a certain standard of what is right and wrong that does not change. And the only thing that's unchangeable in this world is God. And that's what religion comes in. What's the first of the 10 Commandments? Nope. 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 Huh? Yeah. It's amazing. It's about, I observe 10 Commandments, you know. You'll learn a lot about 10 Commandments when you come to Shavuos night, a week from tonight. A week from tonight. First of the 10 Commandments. The problem is really what we feel have a problem with is there is no such thing as the 10 Commandments. I'll let you know a little preview. We don't say Aseret HaMitzvot. Mitzvah is a commandment. We don't say the 10 mitzvot. We say the 10 dibrot. The 10 sayings. Each one is a category of commandment, of which the other 613 fall within. The first, we use the term commandment because we're just stuck with it. We're so used to saying 10 commandments. The first of those is Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am the Lord your God. You know, you can look at it as a commandment. And you know, it's to accept the belief in God. God is the source of ethics and morality. Man has value only because he was created in the image of God. Therefore, relative ethics is rejected because God is the absolute value. There's a vicious trap that we fall into. What happens when society's goals or values are in conflict with Judaism? It happens. Happens more frequently than you think. I mean, in ancient cultures, it could happen. Maybe when ancient cultures had they worshipped their gods by killing their firstborn in some sort of sacrifice or whatever. But what happens when we live in a society and Judaism's goals and values are in conflict with the goals and values of that society? Number one, we can become an observant Jewish secularist. An observant Jewish secularist. We can adopt the goals and values of society, but we observe Judaism by rote. This relegates Judaism to some sort of shallow formalism. You know, we decompartmentalize our lives. We're so expert at it, you know. Here's the Jewish part of our lives. When we come to shul, you know, maybe on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, or maybe when we come to shul on Saturday or whatever. But being Jewish, the other chunks of time in our lives, the other 6 days of the week, or 6.5 days of the week, well, that's something else. You know, there's a sports chunk that we have when we go play golf or tennis or to the gym, and you know, there's a friend chunk in our lives, and we go out with our friends. And we have all these compartments, and we're different kinds of people in each of them. So, you know, we adopt the values of society. When we come to shul, we'll be Jewish, but otherwise we adopt the values of society. The problem is Judaism demands allegiance not only of the feet, of showing up, but of the heart, of the soul. Another approach, second approach, would be to avoid the secular world. And there are Jews who are masters at it. You were following the story of Kiryas Yoel in the news in New York. This community, this Hasidic community, it's a little north of New York City, where they want to create their own school district. It's a restricted community. You can't live in that community unless you're one of the Hasidim and have certain rules. You know, you're not allowed to have a television in your house. You're not allowed to bring newspapers in your house. You're not allowed to have a radio in your house. And they, since it's a whole community, want to create a school district there so they can get government funding for school programming, for disabled children, things like that, right? I won't go into the legalities of that case. It's a very interesting community. I was there a long time ago. As a kid, maybe 30 years ago, when they were starting, there was some. The Rebbe's daughter was getting married. It was a wonderful occasion. Great joy. I see the great joy in their faces. These people don't feel the restrictions in their lives. They just block out the outside world, and they're not part of it. You see the movie Stranger Among Us?
But they're like the Amish that went away. I mean, they do the same thing. It's just that they're not Jewish.
Right. So they have the same. Their values are in conflict with society, so they decide not to be part of society. Right. And the third approach is to make Torah values your own and assimilate what is good in society as well. Make Torah values your own and assimilate what is good in society as well. We Jews are great assimilators. We're masters at it. And I don't mean this in a negative sense. We talk about assimilation today, you know, we talk about so many Jews just leaving Judaism. I mean, that's a negative sense. I'm talking about assimilate what's the best in culture and societies. Whatever society we were in, we were in a lot of different societies and cultures. We were wandering all over the world. Wherever we were, we managed to adopt the best from all of them. And the Sephardim adopted from the Arabic cultures, and the Spanish cultures, and the Ashkenazim adopted from the European cultures. The German Jews in Germany before Hitler spoke better German than the Germans. They were better Germans than the Germans were in terms of keeping the laws and culture and society. They were just enamored by it. They did, and they assimilated a lot of it into their own. And not all that is negative. What I'm talking about is what Rabbi Lamb, who's the chancellor of Yeshiva University, speaks of as Torah Umadab. Torah Mada could be defined as secular knowledge. There is no real secular knowledge. In other words, the insular Hasidim would say, you're not allowed to go to college, because why should you learn about society around? The approach of Torah Mada, of Yeshiva University, says, we have a university where we teach Torah and we teach biology, because biology informs, helps us to understand, enables us to appreciate Torah. It helps us to appreciate the wonders of God in this world. So, and you can make a case in saying that biology and physics and chemistry is as much Torah as Torah. Any true knowledge, any source of true knowledge should help you and you with the understanding of the world. And it's sort of the synthesis of Torah and so-called secular learning which is very important. This is how I would think a modern Jew should live in the world. Not to be a secular observant Jew where you compartmentalize your life and you're just Jewish in those corners of your life where Judaism happens to confront itself, but you adopt the outside world's life. We shouldn't avoid the world and shut ourselves off, but we should make a synthesis and find what's good and wonderful in Jewish life and absorb it and make it our own. So what does the Torah say about women? If you read the story of creation in the Torah, it's very instructive. A woman was created as an Aim Kol Chai, the mother of all living things. It's not her exclusive task to be a mother, but it's a fundamental task. A woman was created last. Rabbi Soloveitchik, who was the head of the rabbinic mentor of Yeshiva University, who passed away a couple of years ago, it was last year. It was last year about Passover time. Had a wonderful thought. I don't know if it was his originally, but if you look at the order of creation, you see that God created the more primitive kinds of beings first, and then gradually, as He created more and more, He created the higher forms, and each subsequent creation was a higher form of life. What was God's last creation? A woman. A woman. A woman is a higher spiritual being than anything else that God has created. At least the feminine side. And I'll end with this thought here. Man was created from the dust of the earth. He was elevated above the animals by given a neshama, a soul. Vayipach ba'apav nishmat chayim, and God blew into his nostrils nishmat chayim, which is normally translated in the Bible, the breath of life. Chayim means life, and nishmat comes from neshama. What does neshama mean? Soul. Doesn't really mean breath, it means soul. God blew into his nostrils a soul of life, a living soul. A living soul. That's what elevates us above all the animals. And we were created b'tselem Elokim, the Torah says, in the image of God. By the way, the Shema, I have to write it out in Hebrew for you. Sorry for those who don't have the Hebrew, but you'll see the point. The Shema It's a nun.
That's
Yeah, well, I'll make it.
Looks like my handwriting.
Yeah, I was
No,
going to
that's-
say that
it
I'd
happens
really
to be-
forget my Hebrew.
It happens to be the way the script of it works. Okay, neshama. Right in the middle of neshama is shin mem, shame. Shame is the name, God's name, the name that we have within the middle of us. God. Shame, Hashem. We talk about God as Hashem. This gives man his ultimate value. That's why man is above all the other creatures. But the Torah then also says, Zachar nekeva bara. God created man, Zachar unekeva, masculine and feminine. He created man masculine and feminine. And I've said this many times. Man was originally an androgynous human being, both masculine and feminine. When he created woman, what he did, took the rib and he separated the masculine and the feminine. But there's a residue of feminine and masculine in a male, and the residue of the feminine, of the masculine in the female. What is this feminine power? What is this feminine side? What is the nature of it? We have shunned it. We have repressed it in our society today by making sex a sexual appeal is what is important about a woman. That's what I began with today. But that is really, that is not it. That is not it. The real strength of the woman is not sexual appeal.
Yeah.
That's just that's the masculine image of what that would be. Okay, I'll leave you with one question for next time. Why do women wear shoulder pads?
I got him.
I just thought on too,
Okay?
Are you really to be continued?
Right. You can come up with two, most women will come up with one of two answers. And both will prove my point.
And it has
Yeah.
nothing to do with.
You guys question at any time.
Okay, this is not related to that. What happens at the Shavuos night Sunday? Over
Okay.
a little